Say it louder. I want you to hear yourself die on my carpet. The room, once buzzing with the arrogant murmurs of powerful men, fell into a silence so profound you could hear the dust settling. The man who had spoken, a portly alpha with a face like curdled milk, turned a shade of ash. I felt the arm behind my back tighten, a possessive, grounding weight. It was Mon Lear Eurostrade's arm, and his voice, a low and lethal rumble, was a shield around my shattered world. You will learn very quickly, he continued, his gaze sweeping over the terrified board members, that in this house, this Emperor Eurostrade's place is beside me. No one dares question it. My breath hitched, my fingers clutching the fine wool of his suit. I was supposed to be a punishment, a debt paid in flesh, a slave to this monster. Yet here I stood, defended by the very beast I was sold to, while the world that had cast me out watched in stunned silence. But to understand how I, a discarded Omega carrying another Marna Eurostrade's child, ended up in the protective embrace of the most feared alpha in the city. We have to go back to the day my life was supposed to begin, the day it truly ended. The air in the wedding hall was thick with the scent of lilies, a cloying, funereal sweetness that could no Eurostrade tea mask the metallic tang of approaching rain. Outside, the sky had bruised to a violent purple, and thunder grumbled in the distance, a divine I was too naive to heed. My hands, hidden in the folds of my white suit, were trembling. A deep, persistent ache radiated from my lower back, a consequence of the precious weight I carried in my swollen belly. But my heart, oh, my heart was a frantic bird, beating against my ribs with a hope so fierce it was almost painful. Today was the day. Today, I was to be bound to Chong Suk, the man whose whispers had built a cathedral of promises in my soul, whose hands had charted the constellations on my skin under summer night skies. He had sworn to me, his voice earnest and low, that should the entire world turn its back on me, he would be my unwavering fortress. What a beautiful, devastating lie that turned out to be. The moment of impact wasn't a slow crumble, it was a detonation. My father's fingers clamped around my upper arm, a vise of cold steel. His voice, a serpentu Eurostrade's hiss beside my ear, dripped with a poison I had never known he possessed. Leave. Now. I blinked, the world tilting on its axis, the smiling faces of the guests blurring into a cruel watercolor. Apper, what are you saying? The ceremony is about to start. Euros. My words were swallowed by the echoing pronouncement from the altar. It was Chong Suk. His voice, once the melody of my dreams, was now a shard of ice. It's over, Yu Yan. Don't a Eurostrade tea make this more pathetic than it already is. You disgust me. The floor seemed to drop away from beneath my feet. My knees threatened to buckle, the weight of my child suddenly feeling like an anchor pulling me into an abyss. W what? The sound was a wounded and a Marler Eurostrade's cry. He looked at me then, truly looked at me, and the love I had memorized was gone. In its place was a chilling void, a contempt so profound it felt like a physical blow. There was no affection, no lingering regret, not even a sliver of pity. There was only pure, unadulterated hatred. Did you really believe I would marry you? He sneered, his words amplified by the cavernous hall. An Omega tainted and swollen with some useless pup. You are utterly pathetic. A wave of whispers erupted from the guests, 1,000 tiny needles piercing my skin. My body began to shake uncontrollably, a violent tremor that started in my core and radiated outwards. Hot, shameful tears burned behind my eyes, blurring his cruel, handsome face. In a desperate, final plea, I turned to my father, my anchor, my protector. But the hand that had held mine as a child now shoved a crisp envelope into my chest. His words were the final nails in my coffin. "Don't ever come back," he said, his face a mask of stone. "If you have any shred of decency left for me, for the honor of this family, you will go to the address inside this envelope. Pay my debt with your body. It seems 30 euros trade is the only value you have left." I couldn't euros trade to draw a breath. My heart didn't just break, it atomized, the dust of it scattering on the cold marble floor. The two men I had built my life around, my father and my fiancée Tilda Copyright, had conspired to destroy me. The crore, my father a euros trade escrow, that was my new reality. I stumbled out of the hall, the lilies and false promises choking me, and into the waiting arms of the storm. The rain came down in sheets, cold and merciless, plastering my white suit to my skin. I clutched my belly, my child kicking within me, a frantic pulse of life echoing my own despair. My tears mingled with the deluge as I made a silent, desperate vow into the howling wind. "I will protect you," I whispered to the life inside me. "Even if the whole world wants us gone, I will protect you." The address scribbled on the paper inside the envelope led me to a place that seemed torn from a nightmare. It wasn't a house, it was a monolith of jagged stone and shadowed glass, surrounded by iron gates that seemed to scrape the bruised belly of the sky. This was the den of the monster they whispered about in hushed, fearful tones. Alpha Moon Lee. The name alone was a ghost story, a legend of ruthless ambition and terrifying power. He was a predator in the world of business, and recent rumors claimed he was a dying one, gravely injured in an accident that had nearly claimed his life. My father had not just sold me, he had thrown me into the cage of a wounded, dying beast. The butler who answered the gate was a tall, gaunt man whose eyes swept over my drenched, pathetic form with undisguised disdain. But the moment his gaze fell upon the official-looking paper in my trembling hand, his demeanor shifted. He offered a stiff, formal bow. "Follow me. The master has been anticipating an arrival." Anticipating? The word sent a fresh wave of terror through me. The mansion's interior was even more oppressive than its facade. The air was cold and sterile, smelling of antiseptic, medicine, and something richer, more primal, like iron and ozone. Corridors stretched into infinity, lined with portraits of stormy seas and hunting wolves. It was a tomb, not a home. And then I saw him. In a vast, shadowy chamber, Moon Lee was laid out on a bed so large it looked like a sacrificial altar. His body was a landscape of white bandages, his skin the color of old parchment. Yet, even in this state of ruin, his presence was suffocating. The aura of a supreme alpha, a predator at the top of the food chain, radiated from him in palpable waves. His hair, black as a Ravna Trade's wing, was splayed across the stark white pillows. His eyes, when they opened and found me, were the color of molten gold, and they pinned me to the spot with an intensity that stole the air from my lungs. So, his voice was a low, ragged rasp, yet it held the undeniable weight of absolute command. "You are the currency my debtor has chosen." My lips trembled, and I could barely form a sound. "Yes, I am Yu Yan." His golden gaze dropped, tracing the curve of my belly. "You're pregnant." A hot flush of shame washed over me, and I instinctively tried to shield my unborn child from his dissecting stare. "Yes," I managed to whisper. He let out a sound, a dry, humorless huff that was half scoff, half sigh. "Pathetic. Your father truly is a man devoid of all honor. My eyes fell to the floor, fresh tears threatening to spill. Euros, I will do anything you ask. Please, just let me stay. I have nowhere else to go. The silence that followed stretched into an eternity. I waited for the verdict, for the dismissal, for the cruelty I was sure would come. Then, to my utter astonishment, his voice returned, a fraction softer than before. Stay, but make no mistake. You are mine now. Do you understand? The words should have been a death sentence. They should have filled me with dread. Instead, they wrapped around the bleeding fragments of my heart like iron chains. And strangely, inexplicably, those chains felt safer than the violent storm I had just escaped. That was the night my servitude began. It was also, though I could not have known it then, the night that love, in its most dangerous and unexpected form, would begin its slow, perilous bloom. My first night in Moonlee's fortress of shadows was a waking nightmare of silence and creeping dread. I was shown to a small, Spartan-desk room. It was impeccably clean, but devoid of any warmth or personality, furnished with a narrow bed and a single window that offered a view of the relentless, thrashing storm. The crisp sheets carried the faint, sharp scent of antiseptic, a constant reminder that I was not in a home, but in the private infirmary of a very powerful man. Sleep was an impossibility. Every so often, my baby would stir, a gentle flutter against my ribs, and I would press a hand to my belly, my lips forming silent reassurances. Don't you worry, little one. Apper is here. I won't let anyone harm you. But the words felt hollow, a lie I told myself to keep from shattering completely. How could I protect my child when I was a prisoner in the house of an alpha whose reputation was built on devouring his rival's whole? The image of Chong Euros Trade's face, twisted in a cruel sneer as he spat the words "you disgust me," swam behind my eyelids. A sob, thick and painful, rose in my throat, but I forced it down. If I allowed myself to break every night, I would never survive this place. The following morning, the same gaunt butler appeared at my door. "The master requests your presence." His tone was as starched and unforgiving as his uniform, his resentment a palpable thing in the air. He seemed personally offended by my very existence within these hallowed, cold walls. I followed him, my hands instinctively cradling my belly, a silent gesture of protection. The mansion was a labyrinth of echoing corridors and grand, empty rooms. The walls were adorned with massive paintings of churning oceans and predatory wolves, and heavy velvet drapes devoured what little morning light dared to penetrate the gloom. The entire atmosphere was designed to crush the spirit, to remind any inhabitant of their insignificance. When the double doors to Moonlee's chamber swung open, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. He was awake, propped up against a mountain of pillows, his face half swallowed by the shadows. Despite the deathly pallor of his skin and the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the hand resting on the duvet, his aura was a physical weight, pressing down on me, stealing my breath. His golden eyes found mine immediately, sharp and piercing as shards of glass. "You didn't run." His voice was flat, an observation, but beneath the surface, I detected a flicker of something else, Euro's surprise, perhaps even a hint of dark amusement. I lowered my head, my gaze fixed on the plush carpet. "I have nowhere to run to." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Good." He made a lazy, dismissive gesture toward a stiff-backed chair beside his bed. "Sit." I obeyed, my palms growing damp as I perched on the edge of the seat. He studied me for a long, unnerving moment. His gaze was analytical, moving from my face to the swell of my belly and back again, as if he were trying to strip away my defenses and read the secrets of my soul. "How far along?" he asked, the question devoid of warmth. "8 months," I whispered, my voice barely audible. His brow furrowed slightly. "And you received no proper medical attention?" It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. My silence was his confirmation. Moonlee exhaled slowly, a long, drawn-out sound that made the butler, who stood sentinel by the door, shift his weight nervously. Then, in a move that completely blindsided me, he called out, his voice sharp with authority, "Send for the doctor. I want daily examinations, vitamins, whatever this Omega requires." I blinked, my mind reeling. "What?" His eyes snapped to mine, fierce and commanding. "Do not make me repeat myself, Omega." My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. No one, not even Chong Suk in his most possessive moments, had ever addressed me with such absolute authority. It should have terrified me. It should have made me shrink away. But instead, a strange and unfamiliar warmth spread through the cold, empty spaces in my chest. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Summoner Euros, this terrifying, broken Alpha Euros was concerned with the simple fact of my survival. Days bled into weeks, and a strange, unspoken routine began to form. I became his keeper, his silent shadow. I brought him his meals on heavy silver trays. I wiped the fever sweat from his brow with cool cloths. And I learned to assist the nurse in changing his bandages, my hands steady despite the brutal landscape of his injuries. He never offered a word of thanks. His moods were volatile. Sometimes his temper was as sharp and sudden as the crack of a whip. Yet, in the quiet moments between the storms, I began to see something else. A silent watchfulness. A subtle, almost imperceptible softening in his gaze when he thought I wasn't looking. During the long nights, when his pain became a living entity in the room, he would allow me to sit by his bedside. He wouldn't speak, but sometimes his hand would snake out and grip my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin as if he were grounding himself against a tidal wave of agony. In the dim, flickering lamplight, our eyes would meet, and I would see the war raging within him, his ferocious pride battling against his Bauder Euro's trade's profound vulnerability. And in those moments, my treacherous heart would ache for him. One evening, as I was smoothing his blanket, my fingers brushed against the bare skin of his chest. I froze, a jolt of electricity arcing through me. Before I could pull away, his hand shot out and captured mine, pressing my palm flat against the solid warmth of his skin. His heart beat a steady, strong rhythm beneath my hand. "Do I disgust you?" he asked, his voice low and raw, scraped clean of all pretense. My breath hitched in my throat. "No," I whispered, the truth absolute and immediate. "Never." His eyes, burning with a feverish intensity, held mine captive. For a tense second, I was certain he would shove me away, disgusted by my touch. Instead, his fingers tightened and he tugged me closer. So close I could feel the ghost of his breath on my lips. "Then why," he murmured, his gaze dropping to my mouth, "are you trembling?" "Because I wanted him." The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. Because even as I carried another man's child, a symbol of my shame and betrayal, I had never felt more secure, more seen, than I did in the presence of this broken Alpha. My lips parted, and I whispered the dangerous truth. "Because you're dangerous." A faint ghost of a smile touched his lips. "And yet, you don't run." Before I could find a reply, his mouth was on mine. The kiss was not gentle. It was rough, searing, a brand of ownership. It was filled with a primal dominance that shattered my defenses and sent my world spinning. My knees went weak, and my body seemed to melt into his, a willing surrender. His other hand slid to the back of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair, holding me fast as he deepened the kiss, staking his claim. A soft moan escaped my throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated need that betrayed just how much I craved this connection, this raw intensity. When he finally broke the kiss, allowing me to gasp for air, his forehead rested against mine. "From now on," he murmured, his voice a possessive growl that vibrated through my entire being. "You belong to me, not as a debt, not as a slave, but as mine." My heart stopped, then restarted with a violent lurch. I should have fought. I should have recoiled, remembered the innocent life in my womb. But all I could do was whisper the one word that felt like destiny, the one word that sealed my fate. Yes, the night after he claimed me with that kiss was a long, sleepless torment. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the phantom pressure of his lips on mine, the memory of his hand gripping the nape of my neck, the echo of his words reverberating in my soul. "You belong to me." My heart should have been a stone of fear in my chest. He was a ruthless man, a predator others called a beast. And yet, that kiss had ignited a dormant ember deep within me, fanning it into a flame that terrified me far more than his power ever could. It had been an eternity since I had felt wanted, truly seen as more than an object or a burden. I shifted onto my side, my hands cradling my swollen belly. My baby moved within me, a gentle roll, and I whispered into the darkness, "What am I doing, little one? He isn't your father." And yet my body hummed with a strange, undeniable ache for him. The next morning, the Dr. Eurostrade's arrival was a stark intrusion of reality. He examined me with a professional but concerned air, asking a battery of questions, prescribing vitamins, and finally turning to Moon Lee with a look of stern disapproval. "You are Eurostrade severely undernourished," he stated, his gaze fixed on my captor, not on me. "This Omega should have been on prenatal supplements and receiving regular checkups for months. There has been a profound lack of care." Moon Lee Eurostrade's jaw tightened, a dangerous tension coiling in his shoulders. His golden eyes flickered to me for a brief, unreadable moment before snapping back to the doctor. "From this day forward, he will have everything he requires. Daily catered meals, all necessary medication, and consistent checkups. I don't care about the cost." I sat on the edge of the chair, stunned into silence. For months, Chong Suk and my father had treated my pregnancy as an inconvenience, a shame. But this Alpha, this man who had every right to despise me as a symbol of another Eurostrade's debt, was providing for me and my child without a moment's hesitation. "Do you understand me?" Moon Lee Eurostrade's sharp voice cut through my daze. "Yes," I whispered, a thick knot of emotion clogging my throat. "Thank you." He held my gaze for a long, intense beat, then dismissed the doctor with a curt wave of his hand. Later that afternoon, as I was changing the linens on his bed, he spoke without looking at me, his voice a low murmur. "You are not simply your father Eurostrade's debt. You are under my roof now. That means you will eat 3 proper meals a day. You will rest when I tell you to rest. And you will do nothing that could be considered reckless. Is that clear?" I turned to face him, clutching the clean blanket to my chest like a shield. "You speak as if you own me." A cold, predatory smile curved his lips. "I do." I should have felt anger, a surge of defiant pride. Instead, my heart performed a treacherous little skip. That night, I brought him his evening medicine. He was drifting in and out of sleep, his bare chest rising and falling rhythmically beneath the thin sheet. The dim light traced the lines of old scars alongside the newer injuries. I placed the glass of water on the bedside table, intending to slip away quietly, but his hand shot out like a viper, his fingers wrapping around my wrist. "Stay." The command was a low, hoarse whisper. I froze in place. "Okay." He gave a gentle tug, and I found myself sitting on the edge of his massive bed. His eyes slowly opened, the gold within them glinting like a predatory strayed S in the darkness. "You're afraid of me," he stated softly. I swallowed hard, the sound loud in the quiet room. "Sometimes." His fingers slid up my arm, his touch tracing a path of goosebumps across my skin. "Good. Fear will keep you from trying to run. But do not mistake me, Omater. I am not your father. And I am certainly not that worthless beater who discarded you. If I claim something, I will never, ever throw it away." My chest constricted. The casual, cruel mention of Chong Suk sent a fresh prickle of tears to my eyes. But Moon Lear strayed S words, so fierce and possessively certain, felt like armor wrapping around the fractured pieces of my heart. My lips trembled as I asked the question that haunted me. "Why? Why do you even care?" He was silent for a long time, his gaze searching my face. Then he leaned in, his breath a hot caress against my ear. "Because for the first time in years, someone looks at me and doesn't flinch. You look at me as if I'm still alive." My heart stopped beating. My body moved on instinct, my mind unable to keep up. I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. This time, the kiss wasn't a strayed teat a brutal claiming. It was a desperate, searching connection. It spoke of shared brokenness and a fragile, burgeoning hope. His hands tangled in my hair, holding me close as if I were a lifeline, and my fingers dug into the hard muscle of his chest as I kissed him back with everything I had. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, his forehead rested against mine. "You're mine, Yu Yan," he breathed. "From this moment, you belong to no one else." And I whispered the undeniable truth of my heart. "Yes, only yours." The days that followed were a blur of dangerous intimacy. We fell into a strange, domestic rhythm. My life revolved around tending to his wounds, and his life seemed to revolve around watching me with those piercing, possessive eyes. The tension between us was a constant, living thing, stretching so taut that every accidental brush of his fingers felt like a brand. One night, as a fever racked his body again, I was wiping the sweat from his brow, my voice a low, soothing murmur. His hands suddenly clamped onto my waist, and with a strength that belied his condition, he pulled me down onto the bed beside him. "Stay," he rasped, his voice thick with pain and need. "Don't leave me." I should have resisted. I should have maintained the fragile boundary between us. But I didn't. I curled up against his side, his arm a heavy, protective weight around me, his unique scent of storm and iron wrapping around my senses like a blanket. For the first time since the wedding, since the betrayal, I slept through the night without nightmares. And when I woke in the morning to the steady rhythm of his breathing and the solid warmth of his body pressed against mine, I was struck by a terrifying realization. I wasn't just surviving in this cage anymore. I was falling in love with my captor. The peace that settled in the house was a fragile, dangerous thing. The world outside, with its whispers of death and betrayal, still existed. The ghosts of my father and Chong Suk still haunted the edges of my nightmares. But here, In the arms of Alpha Moon Lee, I had discovered a sanctuary, and somewhere in the broken soil of my heart, a forbidden love was beginning to bloom, unstoppable and wild. Morning sunlight, thick and golden, managed to pierce the heavy curtains, warming the air. I woke slowly, lulled by the steady beat of Moon Leader Eurostrade's heart beneath my ear. His arm was still a heavy possessive band around me, his scent deeply ingrained in my skin. For a dizzying moment, I convinced myself it had all been a dream. The kisses, the whispered claims, the way he had held me as if I were precious. But then his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly at my waist, a silent affirmation, and the solid rise and fall of his chest beneath my cheek confirmed the terrifying reality. I had given him everything. The Alpha who was meant to be my tormentor had become my only solace. When he finally stirred, his eyes fluttered open and landed immediately on me. For a fraction of a second, his typically harsh gaze softened, a fleeting vulnerability that made my chest ache. "You didn't run," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly rasp still thick with sleep. "Where would I go?" I whispered back. A faint quirk of his lips was his only reply. "Good. You will never go anywhere without my permission." The words should have felt like the bars of a cage snapping shut. Instead, they sounded like a promise of shelter. Later that day, a tense new dynamic had settled between us. As I helped him sit up to eat, he watched me with an unnerving silence. Our fingers brushed as I adjusted the cup of water on his tray, and his touch lingered a moment too long. "You're still trembling around me," he observed, his voice flat. I felt a hot blush creep up my neck. I can't help it." "Why?" he pressed, his gaze pinning me. I bit my lip, dropping my eyes to the floor. "Because you make me feel things I shouldn't." In a flash, his hand shot out, his fingers gripping my chin, forcing my gaze back to his. His touch was firm, but not painful. "There is nothing you shouldn't feel with me," he stated, his voice dangerously soft. "I told you, you are mine. Every thought, every fear, every shiver that runs down your spine, it all belongs to me." Here, my breath caught in my throat. His intensity was a physical force, burning through my defenses, leaving me feeling raw and utterly exposed. His thumb brushed slowly across my lower lip, and the undisguised hunger in his eyes sent a cascade of fire through my veins. He leaned closer, the heat of his breath ghosting over my skin, and just as his lips were about to meet mine, the chamber door creaked open. We both snapped our heads toward the sound. It was the butler, frozen mid-stride, a tray of documents in his hands. His gaze flickered between us, from our proximity to Moon Leader Eurostrade's hand on my face. And though his expression remained a mask of professional neutrality, I could feel the cold wave of his judgment wash over the room. Moon Leader Eurostrade's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "Get out." The single command was laced with so much menace that the butler bowed hastily, his composure finally cracking, and practically fled the room. I swallowed hard, a bitter mixture of guilt and fear churning in my stomach. They're all watching us. "Let them," Moon Lee said, his voice dripping with cold disdain. His gaze snapped back to me, fierce and unyielding. "Do you honestly believe I care for the whispers of servants? This house is mine. You are mine. No one will ever take that reality away from us." The sheer, unshakable authority in his voice made me shiver, and strangely, it soothed the frantic fluttering in my heart. That night, the storm returned, lashing against the windows of the mansion with a renewed fury. I found myself drawn back to his room, the vial of his nightly medicine in my hand, though my own hands were shaking for reasons that had nothing to do with a chill in the air. He wasn't in bed. He was sitting in a large armchair by the window, the flashes of lightning casting his sharp, aristocratic features in stark silver and shadow. His bandaged hand was pressed against the cold glass, his expression distant and unreadable. "You should be resting," I said softly, my voice barely carrying over the howl of the wind. He turned his head slowly, his gaze finding and locking onto mine. In the dim, tumultuous light, his eyes seemed to glow like embers. "And you should be in your own bed." I couldn't sleep. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. Neither could I. I set the medicine on the table beside him, but before I could retreat, he snaked his hand out, his fingers closing around my wrist. He pulled me forward, and I stumbled against his chair, my breath catching as his other hand came up to cup the back of my neck, his fingers tingling in my hair. "Muna euros don't," he growled softly, his lips brushing against mine with every word. "Don't say my name with that tremor in your voice. It makes me want to take everything you're not yet willing to give." My body ignited. My baby shifted deep within me, as if sensing the powerful shift in the room's energy. Tears of fear and confusion pricked my eyes. "I'm afraid," I confessed, the words torn from me. His arms tightened, pulling me more securely against him. "Of me? No," my voice cracked. "Of losing this. Of losing you." For a long moment, the only sounds were the storm outside and the frantic beating of my own heart. Then, to my utter shock, he pressed his lips gently to my forehead. The touch was devoid of his usual demanding fire. It was not rough, not possessive. It was tender. "You will not lose me, Yu Yan," he murmured against my skin. "Not as long as I draw breath." My heart seemed to break and heal itself all in the same instant. I threw my arms around his neck, burying my face against the solid warmth of his chest, inhaling his scent of iron and ozone. And when he tilted my chin up and kissed me again, euros slowly, deeply, with a reverence I never thought him capable of, euros I knew with absolute certainty that there was no turning back. I was no longer a debt or a prisoner. I was his, completely and irrevocably his. The storm outside finally broke, but a new kind of storm, one of intense, possessive passion, was just beginning to gather within the walls of the mansion. His dominance consumed me, every kiss a brand, every touch a promise, branding me as his in a way no legal document ever could. And I surrendered to it all. To the dangerous, beautiful bond that had been forged between us in the crucible of our shared pain. Hours later, tangled in sweat-slicked sheets, my body still humming from the intensity of his possession, Moon Lear Euro's strayed hand came to rest protectively over my stomach. His eyes, glowing in the soft moonlight, had lost their sharp edges. "Our child," he whispered, his voice thick with a profound emotion I'd never heard from him before, "will never know the touch of chains. Not yours, not mine. Do you hear me, Yu Yan? They will be born free." I covered his hand with my own, tears of relief and overwhelming love slipping silently down my cheeks. "And I whispered back, my voice breaking, "we will raise them together." A rare, almost fragile smile touched his lips. Together. Months later, the whispers in the mansion finally died, replaced by a respectful, fearful silence. The board members never dared to challenge his authority again. And when our child was born, a healthy baby with my eyes and his fierce spirit, the household staff no longer dared to call me a slave. I was a mate of Moon Lee, the untamable Alpha, and I was lover Euros completely, irrevocably, and until the very last breath. So, what did you think of Moon Lear Euros Trade's transformation from a cold-hearted captor to a devoted protector? Was it his own brush with death that changed him? Or did you Yarner Euros Trade's presence awaken something that was dormant all along? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of love against all odds.